important at any age, as each phase of life builds on our current health. Get started preparing now for the future by choosing the right kinds of foods and creating healthy habits. This presentation highlights the foods to choose and the 5 essential guidelines you need for a healthier diet. I should always double-check pronunciation of last names. Let's see how I do. Anna Tourkakis?
Very good.
There we go. And then I'm not sure what most of these letters mean, but they're very impressive to me. She is or has a NRDT and an MPA/H. She's a nutritional consultant and founder of Eating from Within Nutrition. She is the author of Delicious Simplicity, Recipes for Today's Busy Life, and she hosts her own cooking show. Anna is a longtime cooking demonstrator for Whole Foods and has developed recipes for many companies, including Welch's Food. So all 35 of us or so, let's give a big round of applause for Anna. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. It's my pleasure to be here on such a beautiful day, number one, and number two, to talk about my favorite subject. Nutrition really is my passion, and it has been for many years, and I find that nutrition is something that you're always learning. I'm always learning new things. I'm always doing things a little bit different, and I think that's what makes it, that's what makes nutrition fun, and also it's what makes it fun to build on today for tomorrow. So in the presentation today, this is a wellness presentation, as Robert was saying, in the theme of what the rest of the presentations for this series will be. I'll be specifically focusing on 5 principles for a healthy eating pattern. You know, we all think we eat healthy, and oftentimes it gets really confusing. I hear all different reasons or all different explanations as to what healthy eating means to people. Sometimes it's, eating, cooking with olive oil. So someone might think that doing the right thing, and you are, and then that's healthy, doing olive oil. Or some people eat avocados, or some people they eat whole grains. And those are all good things, but it's not just the one thing or the 2 things. So tonight I want to talk about really bringing it all together. So what should we be looking for when we think about healthy eating?
Can everyone hear again? I'm okay.
Is that good? Is I'm good? Okay.
I'm good. Everyone's good.
So in this presentation, I don't want to repeat what Robert already said, but essentially, I want to really sort of bring home the point about what's essential when we talk about eating healthy. What are the things that we should be looking for? And interestingly enough, and I hear that a lot, Robert was talking about fudge. There's nothing wrong with fudge in and of itself. There's other things that may make it not quite right, but there's nothing really wrong with fudge. It's just like there's no bad foods or no good foods. It's just food. And as we know, food affects not just our present health, but our future health. So you know how you feel when you eat nice and light, or when you have a meal that's heavy, or you're not eating right. Or we all know we all love vacations, but yes, many times we're like, oh, so good to eat home again. So because we just feel better when we eat healthier. And so that's for the present. For the future, you're building a healthier body for the future by eating right for the present. And the other interesting thing, oftentimes we tell the young kids or the younger kids about, oh, you're young, you can eat that. Well, we need to eat healthy at any age. At any age. In certain ages, we have a little bit more leeway. For example, if you're a very active teenager boy from the age of 13 to maybe 16 or 17, that's probably the only time where you might be able to sort of maybe get away with eating a little bit more fudge than you can as you get older. And I want to emphasize the word active, because if you're not active, you may need a very tiny little piece of fudge. But if you're very active, you can probably have a little more. So at any age, we need to focus on that, eating healthy. And it's also important to start young, to start the kids young, so that we progress and we continue to eat healthy for now and for the future. Because the habits that we set today is what we'll do tomorrow. So I always like to think that today is the future, because today was like tomorrow, but today is the future. So if we can do something tomorrow or next week, we can try to do it today. And that's the quote, the fun part about healthy eating, is that you can always modify and change as appropriate. So a healthy eating, what is the healthy eating principle? So healthy eating is really about the totality of what you typically eat, you habitually eat. We all have the same habit. I think if you look at your shopping cart, you know, over a year's time, you've probably bought the same thing every week. You know, and so those are and that's fine, but those are the things, those are our habits. We continue doing what we typically do. So it's what we typically eat in totality, and these foods that we eat have a synergistic effect. So the sum is more than the individual parts. And as a result, the eating pattern is maybe more predictive of overall health status and disease risk than individual foods or nutrients. So it's not that piece of fudge that's going to increase or decrease your risk, or it's not just cooking with olive oil that's going to make you healthier or not healthier. It's the totality. It's everything that one consumes. Over time, that's the other great thing. It's over time. So we can allow ourselves to eat, to enjoy all the foods that are out there over time, just not all at once or in huge amounts. So what I like to focus on is, so where do we get these principles of what's healthy eating? How do we know? Where do we get this information? Well, one place to look at is the dietary guidelines. That these are where experts get together and they look at data, they look at experiments that have been done, data that has been gathered, and they revise these every 5 years. You probably have heard of them, the dietary guidelines 2015 to 2020, and then the next one's coming up 20 to 25. And of course, most of us think, oh, here they go, changing again. It used to be this, now it's that. But the idea behind that is really to show that there's data behind these recommendations. And it's a bunch of experts from different areas, so they come to a consensus. And these dietary guidelines are put up at the USDA and HHS, which is the United States Department of Agriculture and Health and Human Services. So they work together to put out these guidelines. So, and these guidelines are based on the strategies for obtaining the recommended nutrients, because when it comes down to healthy eating or eating in general, it's all about getting those nutrients that we need to have nice hair, nice nails, fresh looking skin, energy, so that we can get up and face the day as it gets busier and busier for all of us as time goes on. We also want to prevent chronic diseases and promote health. So that's the basic idea behind healthy eating. It's about getting the nutrients that you need and preventing chronic diseases such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and some of the other ones that exist out there. So currently in the United States, we have an issue, I would even say worldwide, is that some important nutrients are undersupplied. So we eat too few or too little of the nutrients that we need, and we eat too much of the nutrients that we don't need, that we need very little of. So it's sort of like the scales kind of shifted. We eat too much of what we don't need and too little of what we do need. So simple, right? All we have to do is eat more of one thing and less of the other. Easier said than done, as most of us know. So the dietary guidelines are really, again, their focus is to kind of publicize the nutrients that we don't consume enough of and those that we consume too much. So nutrients that we don't consume enough of are such as vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, your vitamin E, folate, calcium, iron, magnesium, fiber, potassium. And where do these nutrients come from? What kind of foods do we eat? Fresh, say that again. Fresh foods such as, right, exactly. Fruits and vegetables, and most of us just don't get enough of those, and whole grains too. We just don't get enough of those. What we overconsume, are in a chronicle way, chronically oversupply by the diets of many people, is the saturated fat and sodium. So that's salt. That's sort of, those are the two nutrients that we consume a lot of. And why do you think that might be? Why do you think we might be consuming too much saturated fat and sodium? And they should probably add sugar there too. Processed foods, exactly. So, I mean, so there's an overabundance of processed foods. And what else about processed foods that makes us choose those over the fresh fruits and vegetables? Convenience. Convenience, exactly, convenience. I just bought a new refrigerator, and in the freezer, there's right behind the door, there's a special area to fit pizza boxes. It's like, yeah, pizza boxes, special. You can't fit any, so it's about this wide, like this wide, and you can't fit anything else in there but like 2 pizza boxes, not just 1, 2. So that's why it's so difficult. It's so easy to get that, to get things like that. So how does the typical American diet stack up? So what are we consuming and what should we be consuming? So the lighter, the more, I'm not sure what the color, I'll just point to it. So this color here, the yellowish gold, yellowish color, is what we should be consuming. So for whole grains, we should be consuming 50-50, half whole grains. The other refined, so white bread or versus whole wheat, we should be doing sort of half and half. Instead, what do? The whole, you can see is very little down here, and most of it refined. Vegetables, you can see vegetables. We should be consuming 100%, and we barely get to 60%, as you can see there. Fruits, believe it or not, fruits is the least consumed food group. Isn't that interesting? Do you think that's odd? Do you think that's unusual? Why do you think that might be? Why do you think that we don't consume enough fruit? One of the reasons we eat the foods that we eat is availability, right? So we have fruit at home. We may see it at a farmer's market. What about when we go to restaurants? How many menus can you recall that have fruit as a dessert? None. Right, exactly. And we consume a lot of foods out there, outside of the home, because of just the way our lifestyle is. So anyways, fruits is the least consumed food group. Milk, we should be consuming, they're 100%, and we are basically at about 50. Protein food, as you can see, we consume way over what we should be consuming. But interestingly enough, we only consume about 40% of seafood, which is not very much. So 40% of the recommended amounts that we should be getting. So we eat a lot of protein, but we don't do a lot of fish. Some of there's 5 healthy eating principles, so it's not a lot, just 5. One is to follow a healthy eating pattern across the lifespan, as we mentioned earlier. Focus on variety, nutrient density, and amount. So that makes eating really fun because you get to choose, including that piece of fudge, you get to choose any, food is food. You want to limit calories from added sugars and saturated fats, and you want to reduce your sodium intake as well. And you want to shift to a healthier food and beverage choices. And also that we need to have support of healthy eating patterns for all. That's really very important to get that support. So let's go into a little bit more detail. So the first principle is to follow a healthy eating pattern across the lifespan. You know why? Because all food and beverages choices that we make matter. So especially in a way, I want to say this about liquid calories, foods that, so for example, the difference between fruit juice and fruits, why fruit is the better choice for a couple of reasons. So one is because, well, first of all, if you take the fruit comes with its own sort of nice little package. It's got some sugar in it. It has vitamins and some minerals. So it comes nicely packaged with, the sugar comes along with nutrients and fiber as well in fruits. Whereas the juice, you remove the fiber and you're just left with the juice. So you're actually concentrating more of the sugar. But in addition to that, beverages are not sensed. The body doesn't recognize the calories from liquids, like such as fruits or smoothies or any of the liquid calories that we consume, soft drinks especially. Any of the liquid calories that we consume, because so it recognizes the calories. Those calories get absorbed, and they do what calories do. But in terms of satiety, making you feel fuller, it does not do that. It's not quite as satiating as a fruit would be. So you would be drinking more juice, more liquid, as opposed to the amount that you would eat in fruit. Does that make sense? Follow me with that? So even there, you'd have to, calorically wise, you'd be consuming a lot more in liquid than you would be in solid food. So the other important thing when we talk about eating healthy and how much we should eat, or we should follow a diet, i.e. diet is specific, a certain amount because your neighbor is eating a certain amount and they're losing weight. That's not really about what healthy eating is about. Healthy eating is about choosing the appropriate calorie level to achieve and maintain a healthy body weight that's healthy for you. So you want to maintain your body weight that's appropriate for you. You need nutrient adequacy. It's nutrients. Are you getting the nutrients that you need? People need different nutrients. We're all genetically made up differently, and our body uses things differently. So the nutrient adequacy. So you want to do that so that you can reduce your risk of chronic diseases. So nutrient adequacy is very important because that's dependent on how much nutrients you need or how many calories you need. It depends on your height, your current weight or the weight that you want to be, your activity level, your gender. Men or women, they need different amount of calories. So it varies. There's a lot of stuff involved, and it's not just about the number of calories themselves. It's what's appropriate for you. What you can do based on what your needs are is like, what choices do I make? If we're talking about that teenager who's very active, well, maybe he can get away with the fruit juice. But maybe, we need to have the fruit instead because we need fewer calories, and we need to get more from those calories than somebody that's more active, younger, or whatever. So we need to choose fruits maybe instead of juice. Same thing with vegetable juices, although those are fairly low in calories because they don't contain a lot of sugar. But still, so vegetables, cooked or raw, if you notice as we go along the continuum, vegetable juice, vegetables, cooked or raw, they're, if you want to call them how full they make you feel as we go down, we feel fuller. For example, raw vegetables are more filling than cooked, and than juices and so on. When it comes to whole grains, so you want to start with oatmeal, whole grain cereals, breads. Those are things that you want to make sure that you're eating in terms of lower sugar content, and again, in the appropriate amount. When it comes to protein, you want to think about eggs, fish, lean meats. Those, again, are ways to sort of, we eat less of the more fattier, the foods that carry more calories per amount. Milk, milk, yogurt, low-fat milk, and other milk products. Those, again, you want to look at what kinds, like in what form are they coming? Is it, whole milk, skim milk, non-fat milk? If you want to, let's say if you do want to lose weight, do you have to have non-fat milk? I mean, it'd be good, but if you really don't like it, you can still do whole milk, that's fine. You could just maybe do something different at another spot. Second principle, this is the fun one. You want to focus on variety, nutrient density, and amount. You want to meet your nutrient needs within your calorie limits. So this may sound a lot like the first principle, but it's really different because you want to it's about meeting your nutrients within those calories that keep you at your weight. I guess that's the real reason for sort of keeping an eye on your calories, just so that it's a way, it's an indicator of what your weight is. So if your weight is more than what you'd like it to be, or if it's less than what you'd want it to be, then you could just adjust your calories. So you want to make sure that you get a variety of nutrient-dense foods across and within all food groups in recommended amounts. So what that means is that you want to make sure that you're consuming all the food groups: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, meats, milk. But you also want to choose different foods in those groups. So for example, say you like apples. We don't want to eat apples all the time. You want to make sure that you're that you're using oranges. And in the summertime, you do although now we have the same food all year round, so there's no seasonal food really in terms of availability. But you don't just want to have strawberries, so you want to do blueberries, raspberries, mangoes, so choose all different foods, not just one kind. And that's true in all the other food groups, so not just whole wheat bread, but like whole grain pastas, even things like crackers. So you want to do a variety of things. And there's a couple of reasons why that's important. First of all, it's important because you have varieties of things are more fun, and you can try different flavors, number one. But second, one thing about nature, as we all know, not one food has all the nutrients. Some have more, some have less, but it's really spread without. And so for that reason, you want to choose the different foods so that you get the different nutrients. There's one other point that we don't often think about, and that is that there's a lot of the food sometimes carry some risks with them. For example, let's take some seafood. So such as swordfish or tuna or some of the other fish that has some mercury levels that, those are okay. It's okay to consume them. You just don't want to consume them all the time. So you want to change around. I guess, so that's the important thing. Oh, and then the other with fruits and vegetables, we're all concerned about pesticides and all that. Again, if you vary the foods that you eat, then you're not concentrating any of the really super good stuff or any of the really super bad stuff, because you're kind of like spreading your odds. So you're getting a little bit of everything, and synergistically, it will be much more beneficial. So in terms of talking about nutrient-dense foods, that's really key to staying healthy, and I think. And the reason for that is because we get to eat foods that provide a lot of the nutrients, but very little of those nutrients that we overconsume. So where do you get those kind of foods? If we're eating out in restaurants and stuff, it's very difficult. You have to really, make sure that you know what a nutrient-dense form of the food is. I have a couple of examples here. So for example, grilled chicken sandwich on whole grain bread is nutrient dense. There's nothing there other than nice lean protein and whole grain that we should be consuming. We take that same piece of chicken, we put some bread on it because that makes it crispier, not crispier and juicier. And instead of putting it on whole grain bread, we put it on a croissant or some other fancy bread or popover or something. There, what you have is you've added a lot more what to that sandwich? A lot more fat to that, a lot of saturated fat. Excuse me, pasta with marinara sauce. Again, you can make it white. Remember, we can have half of our grains can be white. We can make it white or you can make it whole grain, whichever you want, with some marinara sauce. So again, we're getting nutrients there, along with the calories, of course, but they're nutritious calories. We take that and we take that pasta, we make macaroni and cheese. What are we adding to that? And we're adding some cream, and we're adding some cheese, and we're adding, more stuff to it. A plain baked apple with some cinnamon is great. It's healthy. You get the sweetness, the flavor that you like, as opposed to an apple crisp or an apple pie that has a lot more fat in it and a lot more sugar. Now, that doesn't mean that you can never have a breaded chicken on a croissant or macaroni and cheese or apple crisp or apple pie. But again, it's like, what do you habitually have? If you typically have fruit, and then you want to have a piece of pie instead, if you're out, that's fine. This doesn't mean that you can't do that. It doesn't mean that you can't have a piece of that fudge that's out there, because that's fine once in a while. It's not, you get the idea. One of the other things about meeting your nutrients within your calorie needs is, of course, amounts, like how much do you have? So these are just a way to look at this. Is not so much more about, eating a little bit, or that's too little. It's not so much about amounts, and I'm talking about in a practical sense. When we think about amounts, it's like, well, you know what? I really don't like that grilled chicken. I really like my chicken breaded and whatever. But maybe we can think about eating smaller amounts, a smaller piece. As we know, when we go out to eat, especially, portions are humongous. I mean, they were just way too much. So we need to think about, oftentimes my husband and I, we go out and we split a dinner, which is really nice now. That's happening a lot. And it used to be like you kind of had to hidden way split something. Now, like, they'll split it for you in the kitchen, and they'll come out with 2 plates, with the split dinner. So I think that's kind of nice and encouraging to take food home. So that's kind of nice too. So I think we've come a long way. So it's just sometimes, though, I have to admit, you forget. Sometimes you just forget, and you forget to ask if they have brown rice. You forget to ask if they have a baked potato instead of the mashed potatoes or whatever. So, but that's okay if it's once in, sometimes you forget. But those are the things to think about. What is on my plate, and is this what I want? So that's, in terms of answering that question, these are like personal choices. I could be telling you, okay, so what you do when you go to a restaurant and they give you a plate, when you tell them to take half of it off right away, because then you'll be tempted to eat. So these are some of the suggestions that you read in magazines and stuff, but that's not really practical. These are like personal choices that you make. And so I encourage that. I encourage that, and it doesn't have to be, a total different, doing things totally different than what you do now. Remember, it's about making shifts. So a portion sizes, portion amounts is a big piece of it too. So principle 3, you want to limit calories from added sugars and saturated fats and reduce sodium intake. I want to say something about sugars. I was out with a couple one time, and of course dessert time came, and we got coffee and I got tea, and I like my coffee black, but I like my tea with milk, not cream, milk and sugar. And they were like besides themselves. Anna, you're using sugar in your tea? I'm like, yeah, I kind of like it sweet, but I took my coffee black. I kind of like it sweet. And they're like, wow. And then somebody said, oh, you know, I used to have my coffee with just a little bit of sugar in it, but, you know, somebody said I probably should have it all black. I'm like, oh, really? Yeah, well, you know, if you don't mind doing it that way. But then he proceeded to get, what's that called? Creme brulee. I'm like, now where's, you know, so the way people think, it's what your favorite things is, and the reason behind it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't get creme brulee or you shouldn't get apple pie. I'm just saying that, you know, sugar is not that bad. It's not that great. It's not that bad in small amounts. The other piece that we do want to sort of pay close attention to is processed foods. They are like everywhere. And when we go to the supermarket, it's getting more and more difficult to find real products, I think. So these processed foods, these are foods that include foods that have been cooked, canned, frozen, packaged, or changed in nutritional composition with fortifying, preserving, or preparing in different ways. So sometimes processing is good, like we add back some of the nutrients to the food, such as you know, baked goods. The flour, we enrich it because we've taken some stuff out, so we need to put some stuff back. We lose some things in the process, but we do try to mitigate that by adding some things back. So for example, think about some of the cereals that we consume, right? That's processed foods. It's, you know, it's better if you do unsweetened cereals and stuff, but still, like Fruit Loops. And so food that doesn't really kind of have, doesn't look like what you get at you know, in the produce aisle, so it's probably processed. You want to consume an eating pattern low in added sugar, saturated fats, and sodium. What happens is the more a food is processed, the more sodium goes into it, and the less potassium goes into it. Sodium and potassium work very closely together. In general, sodium tends to increase blood pressure, whereas potassium tends to lower blood pressure. And where does potassium, what's a good source of potassium? Fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables is the best source of potassium. And obviously you don't get a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables in processed foods. So some examples are, again, I'm talking about a continuum and making those little shifts so that it's easier to eat a certain way. So you want to, foods that are some examples of foods that are low in added sugars, you can start with unsweetened cereals, breads instead of, you know, I don't know what's sweet, breads instead of muffins or sweet bread. So like, for example, like zucchini bread. Okay, zucchini bread's like a cake. It's sweet, like, you know, so things like that. So you want to keep the bread with as little sugar as possible. Fruits, plain yogurt instead of the flavored yogurts. Saturated fats, you want to focus on vegetable oils, fish, legumes like beans and lentils, nuts. Essentially, you want to limit animal products. Saturated fats are found in all animal products. So those are the things to really keep an eye on. So the lowest foods that have the least sodium are your fresh and minimally processed foods. Well, some of the food, even like that plain chicken breast, has had some, we have to do some processing to be able to put it on the table. So, but essentially you want to stay with the fresh food. So the more you cook at home, the more home cooking. And now actually even with a lot of those foods, like a food service, the one that bring you the meals and you prepare them yourself, that's probably a good alternative for busy people. And you can certainly control the amounts of what goes into your meal. Principle 4 is to shift to healthier food and beverage choices. You want to consider your habits or your cultural and personal preferences to make these changes or shifts in food choices. And again, these are recommendations for the general population, and you might be one that it's like, you know what, it's either cold turkey or nothing. You know, so you can go from plain yogurt from flavored yogurt straight to plain yogurt, or from whole milk straight to skim milk, rather than, you know, doing, gee, maybe I'll do 2%, or then I'll do 1%, and I'll do no fat. That may be for you, and it may not be, so whichever. But it's okay to do smaller, you know, in smaller shifts. So for example, you know, think of plain yogurt instead of flavored yogurt. You know, that's one recommendation that I always make. It's like, you know, get plain yogurt and then add whatever you want to it. You will never add enough sugar in that plain yogurt than what's in there from the manufacturer. So, so always go with plain and add things to it yourself. So another example is like an English muffin with peanut butter and jam versus a donut for breakfast. You want something sweet, so add a little jam to it. It's okay. A turkey burger versus a hamburger, just a little shift, or better still, a hamburger versus a cheeseburger. Have a hamburger instead of the cheeseburger. Just as an aside here on these cheeseburgers, do you ever go to Cheesecake Factory and some of their hamburgers, and they'll have like bacon on it and then an egg on it and 2 beef patties? It's like, that's not even edible, I think, but some people do. So, and then another shift to make is maybe instead of medium or large of something, go small. A small, you know, and that could be like a really simple shift to say, you know what, from now on, or as many times as I can when I don't forget, I'm going to order a small of whatever it is you're going to order. And right there, it's like, so you're missing nothing. And you know what, when you come to the end, you come to the end of a small, just like you come to the end of a large or a medium. You know, it's always like, if it's ice cream and it's the end, you know, no matter how much you've had. Principle 5, support healthy eating patterns for all. And that is that we all play a role. We all play a role in it. I've been saying this for a long time, is that we do not eat in a vacuum. We don't eat by ourselves all the time. We eat with, think about it, you eat with your family, you eat with your coworkers. I like to even add that you eat with strangers. You know, we'll walk in a restaurant oftentimes, and you know, you look around and you see what that person down on that table is having. You know, and my husband's notorious for that. I saw, what is she having over there with, you know? So other people, strangers, influence you. We get and then let's not even start with the marketing, TV, the ad, you know, the print, all the ads that we're exposed to. One other piece I really, this is like my own personal thing that I sort of come to find, I've been at this for a long time, and that I've come to realize, is that it's just not what, if there's one member in the family that needs to change their eating habit for whatever reason, whether it's health, or whether, you know, maybe my son was entering a weightlifting competition, so it became like a family affair. So if one person is changing their habits, it's a family affair. It's everyone, especially, obviously you can't make your coworkers, you know, do whatever, but in the family, I think that everyone needs to work together, because otherwise it's difficult enough. It becomes very difficult for that one individual to sustain those changes. We can all change for a week or 2 or even a month, but to sustain those changes, we really need that support from the people that surround us. So I think that's very important. Just as an aside, also, yes, I did support my son for that. He did win for that competition he was participating in. But I must admit, by the last day, I said, you know what? This is it. I'm not doing this anymore. there's nothing in the house to eat because he had to meet like a certain weight, you know, so it was just like, yeah, that's it. But so everyone has a role in helping to create and support healthy eating patterns. I mean, you can have that at your workplace or where you socialize. It's, you know, you can always do things a little differently the way that you don't go with the crowd. If that food that's put on that table, unless somebody's cooking for you, but that food that's on the table just doesn't meet what you want to have, you know, so you don't have it. So this role we all need to play from home to school to work and to communities. So we all play a role in that. So those are your 5 basic sort of principles that you want to kind of stick with. And the bottom line is really that we should consume more of the nutrients that we need and less of the nutrients that we don't need. And there's fewer, so we'll focus more on the sodium, saturated fats, and the sugar that we really need to consume less of because there's just so much out there. So here's an example of, you know, how to go about choosing nutrient-dense foods. So here's the peaches right, I'm pointing here, of course you can't see it. But here's these beautiful peaches here that then they're processed a little bit with a lot of empty calories. You know, so again, it's something to consider. I find this really enlightening. So here's the way that solid fats and sugars that we've been talking about really affect the foods that we consume. So for example, we have a regular ground beef patty, 3 ounces. It's 90% lean, and that contributes 184 calories. By the way, calories is just a fancy name for energy in the nutrition world. So think of calories as energy. So you get 184 calories, and the fat adds 52 calories. So that's not too bad. It's a lean patty. Breaded and fried chicken strips, the chicken portion of it, just that plain chicken, is 138 calories. You add the frying and the breading, and you're adding 108 calories. Now, it is, again, it's not so much about the calories, it's the fact that it's providing you with more of what we don't need, more fats that we don't need. Frosted cornflakes. Flakes themselves are 90 calories. The added sugar is 57. Again, 57 calories that give you nothing. It's kind of, you know, think of it as cash. Think of it as money. So you're paying something full price when you can get it for sale for less at the same price, at the same, you know, the same quality. Fried potatoes, a plain potato is 117 calories. You fry it and you add more than twice as many calories. So you add 141 calories of empty calories. Sweetened applesauce, the applesauce by itself is 105, and you're adding, again, 68 calories of sugar. Whole milk, 83 calories if you had that same milk in the non-fat form. 66 additional calories because of the fat that it contains. So you can see the nutrient dense is the portion that gives you the nutrients along with the calories, whereas the added empty calories only give you empty calories. Now, if you're a very busy person, a very active individual, you may need those extra calories. Again, what's appropriate for your needs. So here's a sample eating plan. This is sort of your typical, what they call your average person consuming 2,000 calories a day. And those are the same things that's what that means when they talk about here in the nutrition label. In the nutrition label at the bottom here, it'll say, this is a short one, but in the bottom you'll see that it says, you know, 2,000 calories are what the numbers are based on when they talk about the daily values here, which is probably a whole other talk in and of itself. But so these numbers that you see on the nutrition label are based on somebody consuming 2,000 calories. So these may or may not represent the amount that you need. So this is the kinds of foods the amount of foods that one would consume on a 2,000 calorie diet, which is typically referred to as your reference person. So the recommended amounts for fruits is 2 cups, for vegetables is 2.5 cups, grains 6 ounces, protein foods 5.5 ounces, milk 3 cups, oils 6 teaspoons. 6 teaspoons, that's how much fat we should be consuming in the day, including the fat that we cook and it's in that we cook with. So how do we break that? Okay, so that's all nice and neat here when we see it like that, okay, but what do you do with these numbers? Let's just go through a few examples. So here we have this day 1. Let's see, we have fruits, we have, let's see. So for breakfast, we have half a cup of fruit, we have 1 ounce of grain, and we have 1 cup of milk. So what could we have with that? What kind of breakfast can we have with that? You might be saying, that's like nothing, but we can think about cereal. We can think about for sort of quote unquote a breakfast meal. We can have cereal with half, or depending on the size, of a banana and milk. So there we have that. Or for example, we could have whatever fruit you want, or even a small serving of juice. We can have a piece of toast. We could have, I'm hesitating because typically an English muffin, we tend to think of it as 1 serving. It's actually 2 servings of whole grains. But let's just call it, your breakfast bread. And with either milk, or you could do the English muffin with some cheese on it, and that would take care of your milk. So those are simple things that you can make. For lunch, you can have like a salad with with a piece of I'll say a pita bread. You can make a salad and stuff that in with a little bit of 2 ounces or a little bit of chicken or whatever kind of meat you want, or tuna. If you want to make tuna salad, you can do that. You have your fat there to make it fat and sugar. As an aside, fat and sugar are things that we innately like. We're actually born with that desire to like those 2 items, and the reason for that is because we need those because our body needs them. And so Mother Nature, in the greatest wisdom, said, hey, I'm going to make it so that you like to eat. Because if you don't like to eat, what happens if you don't eat? We die, right? So who wants to do that? So it's in our best, according to Mother Nature, it's in our best interest to eat, because then we'll, we get the nutrients that we eat that we need, and if we don't eat, then we don't thrive. And in addition, the body has all kinds of mechanisms to guess what? To make us want to eat. And there's no mechanism in place other than one little one that we don't listen to. There's no mechanism in place that tells us, hey, you've had enough, you've met all your nutrients within your calorie needs and your activity level, so you're all set. We don't have a mechanism like that. All we have is that for one quick second, oh, I think I've had enough. But boy, this ice cream's really good. I'm gonna continue eating. So it's very simple to overcome that little signal that we get. And then once we sort of, become accustomed to eating a certain way in certain amounts, that's what we do. Going back to our sample plan here. So that was lunch. For a snack, you don't have to have a snack. You can just maybe, if you want to have a snack, you certainly can. But you can maybe add on. Maybe you can, instead at lunch, you might want to have more grain. So you just borrow from your snack and not have a snack. You may. That's again, personal choices. You don't have to have a snack. You don't have to have 2 snacks a day if you don't want to, depending on how you like to enjoy your meals. For dinner, we usually dinner is our bigger meal, and for good reason too. You know, don't forget. Say if we have dinner at 5 or 6, we're not going to be eating again until 7, 8 o'clock the next morning. So that's a big span of time that your body has to, you know, nourish itself. So you want to make sure that you have a decent food supply within you. So again, for dinner, you can have fruits. You know, you don't just have to cook. You don't just have to have it as an aside. You could have it. Actually, I brought something that we can almost. I would use it as a dessert, but you could also use it in your cooking too. So that's one other way that you can utilize the fruits. Vegetables, ever so important. 2 cups of fruit at dinner is not a lot. When you think about it, especially if you cook it, so look when you cook spinach, it comes down to like, you know, that's why half a cup of cooked spinach is really a lot of spinach. Protein foods, 3.5 ounces. Again, that's not a huge amount, but it's a decent amount. And also you have, you know, you still have your fats to utilize. So fat, again, makes food taste better, and so you can really be creative with these amounts. And then at night, if you need a snack, you can, you know, you figure, gee, I have dinner at 5, by 9, 10 o'clock, I can have a little snack. So, and you can work that in. So these are just here, but they're here for, you can choose your own personal ways of doing it. So putting this all together, it's really about your habitual eating behavior when it comes to healthy eating. What do you typically do day in and day out? And just think that putting it again in perspective and in practical terms, what's your breakfast like? You know, do you have a set, and I'm just saying this for you to sort of get an idea of what you're actually doing. If you know, you may like the way you're doing it, or you may not want to change anything about the way your eating behavior, or maybe you do. So what is it that you want to change? So what's your breakfast like? You know, do you have a set time? Do you have a certain ritual that we have, and what do you want to change about that? So it comes down to habits. You know, what habits do you want to take on? Do you want to adhere to? And what habits do you want to lose? So that becomes really key. And here's the thing, that sometimes we don't think of it this way. I think differently. So I do. It's like, well, you know what? If you start doing something a certain way and continue and continue and continue, there is no way that whatever that activity is will become your habit, because that will be what you do, right? Has anyone made changes into how they take their coffee? Has anyone gone from adding sugar to coffee to going black? You have? What would you do if somebody put sugar in your coffee? Yeah, you see?
Me too.
Yeah.
I never had black coffee. I used to take two creams and 2 sugars. Then I reduced the sugar to just 2 creams, and all of a sudden, I don't know what made me do it. If you put milk or sugar in my coffee, I can't drink it.
No, I totally agree. I did the same thing. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting that way. So what you do is what you do. Isn't that? What you do is what you'll continue doing. So sometimes what gets really tricky is like, well, okay, you know what? But we're creatures of habits. We're comfortable in what we're doing, and so that may require just a little bit more sort of focus. What I tried, the times I've made changes in things, what I find is that what I recommend is, you know what? As soon as you realize that you're not doing what you wanted to do it. Like even if you've gone, maybe you had a little lapse and you're like, oh, you know, I've gone 3 days and I've been drinking coffee with sugar. Like, stop, you know, go back to having it black or whatever it is. If you find yourself going back to the old ways, just don't give in the towel. Like, don't throw in the towel. Let's just say, you know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this right. So again, think about your meals. Think about your breakfast. Do you have your meals? Same thing for lunch. I did, as Robert was saying, I do a cooking class, a cooking show at RCTV in Reading. And I did a class on the forgotten meal. And that's lunch. You know, we think about breakfast and we think about dinner, but lunch is like in the middle there. Sometimes we're home alone, sometimes we're at work, and we know, oh, it just becomes a big thing. And that's a big mistake not to focus on lunch, because think about it. You really need to replenish those nutrients and that energy, and that you want that blood sugar to be in your brain to be with, it can carry you through the afternoon. Because here's what happens. So you don't eat breakfast because you don't eat lunch because, you know, you're tense, you're stressed, you don't think of eating, and then come 3 or 4 o'clock, what happens? Yeah, then you go to the vending machine, or you go to, you know, the break room and rummage around for any leftover party cookies and cakes, typically, you know, and then you get, or even if sometimes you manage to, and this happens a lot, you manage to not do that, but you go home and you're so hungry that, again, and you know what? That's not even you. That's just your body, because your body's like, wow, I have not had food for like since 10, 11 o'clock. I am starving. And that, remember that mechanism that we have, that's very sort of very easy to overcome, you know, that tells you that you're full. You almost don't even sense it. So you just eat and eat and eat, and you never know, you can't tell that you're satiated, that you've had enough, you're satisfied with the food, until it's like, wow, I'm really full now. But boy, I didn't eat anything all day. And you'll be surprised, again, the amounts, you saw that a few minutes ago, what 2,000 calories looks like. It's adequate, but it's not huge. So you that can very easily be, we can overconsume. And then snacks, again, a snack is a mini meal. There's a big difference between having a snack, like you dedicate a dedicated time that you give yourself and you have whatever you're going to have, as opposed to just kind of like, especially if you're home, kind of like picking a little here, a little there. Even in the office, if you're picking at stuff, there's a big difference. That's just mindless eating. That's not a snack, it's mindless eating. So it's okay to have a snack, but make it, quote unquote, give it a name and a ritual. Give it a ritual. So I was talking about, you know, making eating fun, making it so that it's pleasant tasting. So what I brought here that maybe we can try on the way out is a combination of this is a recipe that's in my book, Delicious Simplicity, and it's spiced mixed fruit. And it's a combination of seasonal fruits, and all you need is about 4 to 6 cups. So these are great recipes because you don't have to mix, you don't have to measure exactly. So what I brought today is strawberries, and I used a rum extract because I don't typically, like when I do things like this, I don't bring alcohol. So I used rum extract with some sugar and water. So I did not use the sugar. I used a cinnamon stick and some aniseed, and I did soak the raisins in the rum extract. Then you just mixed it all together, and you let it sit for a little bit before serving it. So I just thought I would share that with you. I have an online program. So if you take one of my cards, and actually, if you go to, you can either send me an email at anna@eatingfromwithin.com, or you can look up my website, eatingfromwithin.com.